Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm a spoken word artist and also one of the co-founders of Mockingbirds, which is a spoken word poetry group based out of Chennai. For starters, spoken word is words that are spoken, are words that are spoken, and it's a catch-all phrase that includes all poetry that's recited aloud. This includes music. It can be traced back to jazz, hip hop, rap, theater, prose monologues, stand up comedy, comedy routines, that is, um, poetry readings. Uh, it is also called slam poetry, which was coined by someone called Mark Smith. He is a poet turned a construction worker turned poet, and he started this open mic format of spoken word, which is called slam poetry, in a pub in Chicago, and that's where it got its term today. That is today that we see today, or the form that we see today, the open mic format. And spoken word uses what spoken word is actually very old. It's older than print culture. It's older than the written word. It can be traced back to Greek. I can trace it back probably to Greek history, where people used to come together in citadels and amphitheaters, and uh, they one person stands up and speaks and the other person listens, and they have conversations about politics and sensitive issues and all of that. So that is spoken word, and it's really old. It's nothing new. um, that's why it's even older than written formal poetry. So spoken word also, I was also asked to talk about the difference between niche poetry and spoken word. Now, I don't really like to call it niche poetry. Poetry is poetry, and it cannot be different. One cannot be different from the other. It can be different forms. That is okay, but poetry is without definition, and it doesn't. That's what. So we all of us are introduced to poetry at a very young age in schools. So we are taught this. Poetry cannot be taught. You cannot be asked to write a poem. I mean, you can write a poem, but then you're given a structure. You are told to write. You're taught rhyme schemes and alliteration and metaphors and similes, and we think, okay, this is how you're supposed to write a poem, uh, which I don't believe. I don't come under that school. Well, that is why poetry is considered very elitist, or meant for an elitist crowd, or it's only meant for academic discourse and nothing else. What spoken word has done is made poetry appealing and accessible to the masses. It has become a form of expression which was not earlier. It was, if you ask, I mean, if you say poetry, only a very small number of people would like it. It was difficult to find people who like poetry at one point in time. Now, spoken word has changed that perspective. That's what it's done. And also, why do we go to poetry readings, really? Why can't we just sit at home and read from a book, have coffee, lie down, read in your freedom, read in your own space? Why do you have to go and listen to someone talk, or read the same thing that you can just read out of a book? It is the same reason as to why you go to an Adele concert or a Coldplay concert. You go there because you want to hear it, even though you have heard the song a number of times online or as audio in your phone. You want to go hear it in a live concert because you want to hear it from them. That is the same thing. So it uses, it is because when you speak something, it is much more powerful. When you I'm not saying that, I mean, the pen is much more mightier than the sword, but it has to be, even to speak, it has to be written first. But when you speak it, you're connecting with your audience, you are connecting with people around you. That's why you write, right? It connects better when it comes out of your mouth. Like, mouth is one of the most democratic instruments, and speaking one of the most democratic forms of expression. uh, and when you are reading a poetry, there is a double connection. There is you, the poet, standing up from the pages of your own book and reading it or delivering it. And then there is the audience who have come together out of common interest. Now, there is the double connection. And for that moment, your poetry stands up from the silent confines of a page. And the there is a certain authorship you have over your words. And that is the beauty of it. That is the power of the spoken word. And also in a time where you only want to convey anything through written word, like we're always SMSing or texting or mailing. Nobody wants to talk. You might as well mail. I mean, even in office, even at home, we all do the same. We don't just pick up our phone and talk. That's why spoken word, I think, has found a lot more meaning. I mean, all we do is go to Facebook, check on our timeline, read news, read. You need to hear people speak as well. You need to speak as well. And that's when spoken word, that is why I think spoken word has caught on so quickly, even though it's so recent. I think you've understood the difference between written words. So personally, I write performance pieces and pieces meant for reading differently, because I consider my audience. I somehow feel there is a difference. There are a lot of people who think otherwise. I think it's their own, to each his own. But for me, this is how I do. So for me, it is in some ways very different, but it is all the same. I'm being very confusing, I know, but that's how it is. Very difficult to explain. Now, how it is catching on in India? It is catching on majorly, actually, more than I think it is. I mean, it's much more better in other metros, I think. In Delhi, they have the Delhi Slam Poetry Movement. They have a lot of other groups that conduct open mics. In Bombay, they have. In Bangalore, it happens in a lot of pubs. I think every other weekend they have open mics. So in Chennai, I think slam poetry was introduced to the city by Prakriti, who's been doing for years a lot of poetry events, poetry readings. So they, I think, conducted. I remember participating in it. One of the first, I think, in 2009, slam poetry competition. I had a lot of participants in different languages, Hindi, Tamil. So it's not really confined to English, if that's what you think. Also, social media has become such a huge platform for spreading spoken word. That is one of the ups that we have out of social media, Facebook, YouTube. I mean, for me, to learn performance poetry or how to perform, my only example was button poetry. It's a huge resource you have a lot of artists, varied artists, so that is there. Another poetry group that I have to mention is Airplane Poetry Movement. They recently bought Sarah K, one of the most sought after artists in the world, spoken word artists that is, in the world. They brought in for an event recently, I think twice. So that is happening. I mean, a lot of people I hear went for that event. I couldn't make it. So a lot of people happening. I mean, if you keep up with the right pages on Facebook, you can know about these events. So I think it's mostly spread through social media. So that is the scene of spoken word in India. And also I have to talk about our project Mockingbirds. Now we started this in 2015. A couple of friends, we came together and we didn't have a platform to perform our work or share our work. So there was no at that point there was no platform, as in there were no open mics for spoken word. So we had to wait for a competition to perform, and we didn't like the idea of competing either. That is another thing. I don't think poetry is meant, you can't compete, because everybody's poetry is different. It's very individual to individual, and you cannot, there is no basis of judging it. So we started this to help budding poets perform, to help them give a platform without any, we don't weigh their work, we don't read their work before they perform, we do nothing of that sort. There is no registration. So we want to keep it like that. We are a completely non-profit organization. And we started, I remember, a couple of friends, we had an event, and the second event, I think we had like one participant. We were so let down. We were like, oh my god, I think we made a mistake. But we still performed, so we were happy about that. So but our recent event, we had like 75. That is a huge number for a poetry event. So that's how it's catching on. So that it's growing. People are hearing about it, and everybody comes up to us and like, oh my god, we didn't know that Chennai had a spoken word poetry group. I'm like, we are the answer. So our event recently, one of our bigger milestones was in January, when we took a workshop for IIT Sarang. We conducted it, and that was a huge milestone for us. And we are looking at conducting more workshops, more involving with a lot of schools. Like I said earlier, schools need us. So we are in a lot of, because poetry is introduced to children, and if spoken word is introduced to children at a young age, it would help them become a well-rounded artist. So we are in a lot of talks. We are in a lot of talks with